I'm gonna inlay massive 24 karat gold wire inlays into the Serenity Dagger guard. There's 3 steps we'll have to take. 1, we'll have to engrave a groove for the gold to fit in. 2, we'll need to make dovetails to hold the gold in place. 3, this is one of the most satisfying steps, which is to smash the 24 karat gold into the grooves. We have one big problem though. If I make the grooves too shallow, the finished gold inlay will have black metal bits sticking up through it, completely ruining the look of the 24 karat gold inlay.
To begin the gold inlay on the guard, the first thing I need to do is spray the guard down with Dykem layout fluid. Then I'll be able to take my dividers and lightly scratch some lines in the layout fluid to give myself a layout to follow when I go to start engraving in lines.
I got the layout done on the top portion of my guard here. Got some nice lines I can follow. The next thing we need to do is start cutting the grooves for the gold itself. To the engraving room. I've got the guard all clamped up in my ball vise here. I've got the microscope all set up, and I've got my chisel ready to go on my graver handpiece. I'm ready to start cutting in these lines, but I need to be super careful. If I make one little slip or jerk the wrong way as I'm cutting in these grooves, I could completely mess this guard up big time and have a big groove where I don't want it.
As I'm cutting in these lines, I need to be very careful not to slip and gash my guard really deep somewhere. I also need to be very aware of how deep I'm cutting in the groove for the gold inlay. If I cut the groove in too deep, the gold wire I'm using won't be large enough to fill out the groove very well, and I might have to smash the gold below the surface of the metal to kind of get it to fill out the groove, and then I'll have to sand the surface of the guard down till it's flush with the metal. Another problem that I have to be very careful of is to not make the groove too shallow. This is actually a bigger problem than making it too deep. If you make the groove too deep, you can just smash the gold in there, do some extra sanding on the guard, maybe use larger wire or put 2 wires in. But if you make the guard too shallow, you might not realize it until the guard has been completely finished and gun blued, and you start seeing little teeth of black metal showing up through the gold wire inlay. This is something I absolutely want to avoid, because at that point, it would be such a nightmare to go back and redo the gold and redo the guard and the bluing and the finishing and everything.
I just finished cutting in all the grooves on this side of the guard, and thankfully I didn't make any egregious mistakes, didn't make any jerks or anything, and have the groove going off the edge. Everything's looking really good so far, and I'm very happy about that. The next thing I want to do is take this little tiny chisel and actually dovetail the groove. Right now the groove is kind of a square shape or a rectangle, and that would probably kind of hold the gold in, but I want to lock that gold in place. So what we're going to do is turn it into a dovetail shape, where the bottom of the groove is actually wider than the top. So when I hammer that gold in there, it'll fill out the bottom.
The dovetail I'm making on the bottom of the groove is almost exactly the same as a dovetail that a woodworker might use on something like, let's say, a cabinet. I love almost every aspect of doing 24 karat gold wire inlay like this, but making the dovetails is definitely one of my favorite parts. There's something really satisfying about taking this chisel and just shoving it into the sides of the groove and seeing that metal kind of mushroom up as I go.
That's the last of the dovetailing there. I've gone all the way around both edges of the grooves, so they're dovetailed on the bottom, but that's not where I'm gonna finish everything out. The next step is gonna be to come back with this slight variation on my dovetailing chisel, and we're gonna make a bunch of different cuts on the bottom of the groove. It'll lock the gold in place, and it'll help keep the gold from scooting around a bunch as I'm hammering it in place. I just come in kind of on this angle right here and make a little cut. You don't want to make too big of a cut though. You'll raise the metal up too high and it might show in the surface of your gold, and that would be really bad. And I'm just going to move the cutter back about a 1/16 of an inch, plus or minus a little bit. Make another cut, move a 1/16, make another cut, and I'm going to go all the way around the parts that way. And when I'm finished in that direction, I turn around, and in between every one of the cuts, I make a cut going the other way. And this is effectively making little kind of dovetailed teeth at the bottom of the groove to further hold the gold in place.
If the groove was too shallow, these are the teeth I was talking about earlier that would show up through your gold inlay, but you might not see them until after the gun bluing is finished. The reason you might not see them until the gun bluing is finished is because they might just barely be sticking through the gold and they wouldn't really be noticeable. The silver and gold color would kind of blend in, but after the gun bluing, any of those teeth that are sticking through the gold would be jet black and stand out like a sore thumb. As I cut in these teeth, it's my final chance to make sure everything looks good with the depth of the groove.
I just finished cutting in all the little dovetailed teeth on the bottom of the groove. The next thing we're gonna use is some really thick 32 thousandths diameter gold wire. This is 24 karat. I need to anneal it first to make sure it's nice and soft. We want the gold as soft as we can get it so it'll squish into the groove easier. And I also need to make a little tiny ball on the end. Just by melting it, it'll give me a little bit more material for when the wires meet up with each other. I'll be able to blend that seam in and make it invisible. So I like to form a ball just with heat. I find I normally have a tendency of overcutting my grooves and making them a little deeper than what the gold comfortably wants to fill out a lot of times. And that's probably because one of my biggest fears is that I'll make the groove too shallow and end up having those little dovetailed teeth at the bottom of the groove showing up through the gold. That would just be horrible. I would get the guard all completely done and then just see some black lines showing up in the inlay, and that would pretty much ruin the gold inlay right there.
I've done everything in my power to try to make sure these grooves are the right depth. I especially hope they're not too shallow and I end up with little teeth sticking up through the gold after I've hand sanded everything flush. But for now, I just gotta smash all this stuff in and trust that I've done it right. Earlier I mentioned one of my favorite parts is doing the dovetails because I get to see how soft the metal is relative to the chisel and see all that metal move and deform. Well, this is my second favorite part because once again, we're seeing lots of metal being moved. This time it's the gold. The gold is so soft relative to the hardness of the steel and it just squishes right into place, and there's something really satisfying about it. By the way, this gold wire inlay I'm doing isn't the normal gold wire I do on a lot of my projects. This is the extra large deluxe version of gold inlay. The normal gold inlay that I do is with 20 thousandths of an inch thick 24 karat gold wires. This gold wire is 32 thousandths thick. That's a little over 2.5 times more gold than the 20 thousandths wire. And because of how thick this gold is, I was able to use a really wide chisel to cut in all these grooves, which means we'll have a really wide, bold, prominent gold wire inlays that are gonna be a little extra special compared to my normal gold inlay. I'm pretty sure the last time I did gold inlays this large was on the Excelsior sword that I made quite a while ago now.
I finished smashing all the gold into the grooves. Now I'm over at the hand sanding station and I'm gonna hand sand the surface of the metal down and get back to where the gold is nice and flush with the surface of the metal. In some places the gold sticks up, and some places the gold is dished under. So I wanna get everything smoothed out, flattened out, and see how the gold actually looks, because right now it looks really, really rough.
This is the stage where everything's gonna start coming together. I'm gonna sand the surface of the gold down flush to the metal, and in some places where the metal is higher than the gold, the metal will get sanded down flush to the gold. I'm gonna quickly heat color the guard with a torch, just to kind of simulate how the gun blued finish will look on the guard. The heat coloring will also help me see if I have any of those little teeth sticking up through the surface of the gold.
I finished hand sanding the surface of the guard, got the gold and the guard all nice and flat and flush, got everything cleaned up. The gold looks very nice. I'm not seeing any of those little dovetail teeth sticking up through the gold, which is a really good sign. And it looks like the gold filled in the grooves pretty well. My favorite parts of the gold inlay on this guard are these little areas right here, where the gold wires come together and they become one kind of thick wire. I love how that looks with this really fine point in the middle. Overall, the gold inlay looks great. The lines are nice and clean and crisp. The corners are nice and square. I couldn't be much more pleased with how this came out. If you ever thought you wanted to do some gold inlay or engraving, I highly recommend jumping into doing gold inlay. And I want to encourage you to give it a try if it's something that you've even had the slightest inkling of wanting to learn. It's really fun. It's not that difficult. It just takes patience and time. Anyway, go out, give it a try. Inlaying gold is super fun. You can also do silver and copper and other metals too. But gold's the easiest because it's the softest. I will see you in the next video. May the forge be with you. Bye-bye.